Hello, my name's Ben,
And my name's Josh.
and welcome back to FPL Graduates, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be running through our Game Week 2 teams. So, without further ado, let's have a look into Josh's team.
Yeah, so getting into it then, obviously from our team reveals on YouTube, a couple of things changed for me. Obviously, I was on that bench boost, so I had to be a bit reactionary to the press conferences news that I mentioned last week. That did make me bring in Tossin, who then didn't start on my bench boost, which was fantastic. So yeah, maybe just sort of trust your gut and go with Michael Keane, although he did only get 2 points too. But yeah, overall, I was fairly happy with my game week one score. I think I got 66 points overall, 1.7 mil rank, which if I get that every single week, I'll have a very good rank by the end of the season. So yeah, very happy despite the benching of Tosin on that bench boost. So yeah, this week, Sales is in goal. We've got Crystal Palace away and obviously the double up with Nico Williams. I was so gutted that they conceded at the end of that game to Brentford. They definitely deserved the clean sheet. Brentford were pretty toothless going forwards, and for it to be a handball penalty, it just felt very, very harsh. But hey, it's what happens in FPL, unfortunately. And yeah, Crystal Palace away this week, potentially without Eze. I'm very interested to play the double up. I don't think that Palace will necessarily struggle crazy amounts, but I think yeah, it's going to be an interesting game, and I think one that Forest could definitely keep a clean sheet in if Eze isn't available for that one. Obviously, Tosin is in the team at the moment with West Ham away. It's a nice fixture from a defensive point of view with how poor they were going forwards against Sunderland. So, hoping that he is fit. Obviously, if he is fit, I expect him to play. I don't know if they would necessarily play Pong again, although he did play very, very well. So it's probably a question mark that I'm having to think about definitely going into this week, which I didn't really want to do. I definitely don't want to waste a transfer on a defender. So if he isn't fit or if there's a question mark maybe about him playing, then Vandenberg will come in for me against Villa. It does provide a clash for me in my team, but DEFCON wise, he did really well game week one. I expect something similar to that in game week two. So if I'm getting a 3 pointer, a 2 pointer, then I'll just take it and run without having to use the transfer this week. And obviously, Diouf rounds off the defence, which is looking quite ropey to be fair, considering how much thought I put into this. It's not looking too great. So yeah, Diouf at home to Chelsea again, not expecting a clean sheet. This is more of an EO play because I don't own any Chelsea attackers or other than Tosin at all. So yeah, I'm just going to back my judgment and hope that West Ham can keep out Chelsea in that game. And obviously, Juve himself has decent attacking threat as well. So it's not the end of the world if they concede. There's a chance that he could obviously score. Saw him nearly score against Sunderland with his shot cleared off the line. So yeah, not an ideal back line, Ben. What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, not ideal at all. And look, like the double up of Nottingham Forest is interesting. I think that's a good. It's actually, I think, a pretty decent shout. Of course, Palace did score against Chelsea, but it of course got ruled out. We could see quite a tight game with quite a lot of DEFCON potential in it. So I'll be very interested in having two players from that game at a minimum. Yeah, in terms of Diouf, not ideal, but understand the play that you're looking at there in terms of EO. Makes sense to really sort of double down on West Ham this week, albeit not great last week. That could change, of course, in a London derby. And then Tosin, yeah, you got to hope he's going to be fit because I wouldn't be confident in playing Vandenberg going into this game week. Yes, he will pick up Defcon, but I do think they'll concede goals again. So yeah, slightly concerning in terms of defense being this early into the season. But look, you always knew that you're going to have this issue in game week two, and just given the funds that you've had to spread around, it's meant that the defense has taken the hit on it because you've gone without a premium in there, which has had an impact on where you can go with that and the options that are available to you at least.
Yeah, 100%. Hopefully, it gets a bit better in the midfield then. So, yeah, we're starting off with Iliman Jai, who I was super disappointed with on Monday Night Football against Leeds. Didn't really get into the game. He was semi close to DEFCON. I think he ended up on 9 in the end. So, There is that, but yeah, if I was to sell a midfielder at the moment, he'd probably be top of that list. But he isn't being sold. I'm keeping him for the next couple of weeks, hoping that he can obviously maybe get a penalty or something. I think in general, Everton just didn't play too great, and David Moyes mentioned that in the post-match presser, and I expect him to probably turn that around for the first game at home at their new stadium as well. So yeah, a bit of a narrative bias on that one. Bukayo Saka is up next. He does have my armband currently against Leeds at home. Obviously, there is chat about Gyökeres probably being the main penalty taker as it stands. That is a fairly reliable Swedish source as well. But as I mentioned to Ben in the previous video on the free hit, I don't feel like Saka needs the penalties. We've seen it in previous seasons. He hasn't had the penalties 100% of the time anyway. So, it's not something he's relied on for FPL points, and I don't expect that to change too much going forwards. Obviously, it would be a nice addition. And also with Gyökeres as well, there's no guarantee he's playing 90 minutes at the minute either. So, if they get one late on, there's a good chance that Saka could actually take it anyway. Fernandes is next. He was probably quite unlucky not to get any more points against Arsenal. We finished on 11 DEFCON. And also created 5 chances as well. I expect him to get in amongst the points against Fulham and definitely against Burnley the week after. I quite like the Fernandes pick going forwards. Quite excited to own him. Cody Gakpo is next. He only scored 1 less point than Salah, which was absolutely marvellous for me as a non-owner. He looked really good. I think created 3 chances as well. His assist threat was pretty high. So, yeah, excited to own him. Newcastle away, I think it's going to be a tough game for Liverpool. Defensively, Newcastle looks really good at Villa Park, and I expect something similar against Liverpool. Obviously, without Isak, they're going to have to put much more focus on their defence because they're not going to have a star man like him to bail them out going forwards. And then Elliot Anderson, who I brought in for Reinders, which was frustrating at the end of Saturday. But when I saw Elliot Anderson play on the Sunday, I was very, very pleasantly surprised. He obviously picked up an assist for Chris Wood. He was unlucky not to get one from the corner that Chris Wood scored from as well. I think he's one off DEFCON as well. He had missed a big chance, so yeah, it could have come away with about 20 points by the sounds of things, if only. But yeah, I'm happy to own him. Obviously, he's nailed week in, week out, which is something that Reinders definitely can't provide us at the moment. I do think Reinders' minutes is good in the short term, but when they get Champions League, it might change around. So what's the thoughts on that midfield, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, fairly strong midfield, definitely stronger than your defense. And Dye is an interesting one. Like, I completely sort of understand where you're sort of coming from in terms of the options that are available that are more appealing at that price point currently. But let's wait and see. Everton didn't look too great. We'll have a look at that. And look, I think Saka's probably the best captaincy option this week overall. So yeah, don't hold sort of any issue with you having that as a captaincy option. Anderson did look good, and the stats he put up were decent. Defcon he put up were fairly decent, so I can understand why you're sort of looking at starting him this week. And like I said, Gakpo again should be fairly sort of secure in terms of his minutes going into next game. Of course, once the transfer window shuts, then we may see sort of a reduction in those minutes. And then Bruno Fernandes, of course, people panicking with him for the hardest game they could possibly have in game week 1. I think he'll be all right in game week 2 and 3.
Yeah, and then into the strike force then, we've also got Erling Haaland off the back of that brace, which I captained him for last week. Super happy with that. Obviously, after seeing Salah score late on in that Friday night game, I was a little bit worried, I'm not going to lie. But yeah, he managed to sort of bag those 2 goals, which was great. And also a more positive point is that Man City looked really good. I know it was against Wolves, but the performance was a lot better than what we've seen in sort of last season compared to the seasons gone by where they've winning trophies. So yeah, very happy with him. It is between Saka and Haaland for captaincy. I've had to say at the moment, I'd probably say I'm 70-30 Saka. The only thing that would change that is if maybe an injury to Spurs or something like that. But I expect Spurs to set up in that sort of same system that we saw against PSG. So I think the chances are going to be a lot more limited to Haaland. He did have 4 big chances against Wolves. So, Is he going to get that many against Spurs? I'm not so sure. Obviously, Ollie Watkins as well. Brentford away. Looking forward to that fixture. You could even argue he's a captaincy candidate this week with that how bad Brentford were in that game. I do think they will shore it up a little bit. Like it's not going to be as open as that probably in game week 2. And also Villa need to improve on themselves from an attacking point of view. Very disappointing with them in game week 1. So hopefully they can turn it around at game week 2. The rest of the team, I could play Verbruggen if I wanted to switch off that double up in defence on Forest, but I'm quite happy with it. With just judging by the way that Palace are at the moment, Fulkrug won't get near the team with a really disappointing performance in game week 1, and yeah, hopefully Vandenberg doesn't come anywhere near the team. Although he was probably one of my highest scoring defenders last week, even with those 3 goals conceded. So, what's the thoughts on the team, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like I said, an interesting bench, but of course, there's not too much you can do now about that. But the overall sort of consensus is that starting 11's fairly strong. Of course, there's a couple of problems and issues that will be addressed over the next few weeks for sure. But for now, there's not going to be too much that you can do about that. And look, you've got the 2 better and probably best captaincy options to go for this week, which puts you in a strong position, especially after getting a return in game week 1 from your captaincy. So yeah, it's wide open, and I think definitely a solid team for this game week. Okay, so moving on into my team, and again, we had a couple of changes prior to the deadline from my game week 1 team reveal. I think Murillo came in as yeah, Reinders was in, and there's a couple of others that Porro who came in as well. So we start off in goal. We've got Sanchez in goal. Opted for him over Dubravka. Chelsea were fairly solid defensively. There was a couple of opportunities for Crystal Palace, which I think on another day they would have scored. And look, we would have, maybe had a different opinion on that if they did score. But he's going to be my goalkeeper for game week 2. As much as I think Dubravka is a decent option this week, of course, Sunderland do look quite strong going forwards, albeit they definitely overperform their XG metrics. Pedro Porro is one that I'm relatively and sneakily excited about this game week, which never thought I was going to say that. But given his performance against Paris Saint-Germain in the Super Cup, and I believe he was close or did hit DEFCON within that match based on FPL sort of like metrics on what classifies as a DEFCON. So I anticipate that for Man City away, they'll play a back 5 with Porro wing back, and look, he takes a lot of set pieces as well, so there's that attacking threat there. Murillo in a really 50-50 game against Crystal Palace away screams of a lot of DEFCON points, which brings me on really to Richards as well, who I am very tempted to start over Esteve going into this game week. It's just a case of how much I trust Burnley. I don't think I'm trusting them quite too much at the moment. So I may go a little bit safer, in my opinion, and go Richards as well and bank on a few DEFCON points going in that Forest and Palace game, and maybe sort of back in, Forest's pre-season performances over the potential sort of 3 goals that they scored in game week 1. So we'll have to wait and see. That's a pretty 50-50 decision for me in the defence at the moment. Josh, what's your thoughts on the defence?
Yeah, overall it's really good. I agree with the Sanchez pick over Dubravka. I think that's a little bit safer, and obviously you're covering off that Chelsea EO defence, which is pretty high at the moment. Sanchez obviously coming away with 8 points, which is a nice return in game week 1. I agree with Porro. I think the attacking threat from the set pieces and open plays there to see, albeit that Kudus does drift out wide quite a lot and probably maybe take some of the crossing off of Porro. So one to watch, obviously, as the weeks progress. You'd expect Kudus to play more centrally if they do field that same formation against PSG. I think, yeah, Richards versus Esteve is an interesting one. It just all depends on how well you rank that Sunderland's attack. I watched parts of that game against West Ham, and yeah, they did look good going forwards. Like there's a lot of pace there, which I think is going to be really good on transition. And with Burnley being at home, you'd imagine they're going to have a lot more of the ball than Sunderland. So I think there's definitely chances for them to get caught on the break. So I don't mind the idea of starting Richards, just a DEFCON magnet. Your chances are you're probably going to get close to 10. Before a ball's even kicked. So yeah, I really like that. I think there's probably chances for DEFCON on all 3 of those defenders.
Yeah, definitely. And moving on into the midfield, and this was where it gets interesting. We got The Liverpool double up, Florian Wirtz and Mohamed Salah against Newcastle away. Newcastle definitely going to be a tough fixture. A bit of added bite into that on Monday night. At the moment, the captaincy is on Salah. I think he is a decent option still for captaincy this week. There's been a lot going on at Newcastle, a lot of distractions with this Isak situation. So let's wait and see. They were very solid against Aston Villa. So that's the only thing really sort of putting me off the Salah captaincy at the moment. Palmer is an interesting one for me. I'm very tempted by the captaincy. Of course, that game week 1 performance maybe sort of puts a little less confidence and conviction in my decisioning in captaincy. So again, a second 50-50 call for me to consider and think about. One thing to note as well, of course, is Chelsea are that Friday night game as well. So got to take that into consideration a little bit. If I do captain Palmer, he blanked, it's going to be a horrible wait for Monday night. Definitely. Reinder's in there as well. I'm hoping that City play a similar sort of system to last game. My thoughts and feelings is they're going to play a different system, and Ait Nouri is going to be the guy that potentially gets those returns over Reinders and could become the star. So we'll have to just wait and see how they set up for that. And then Morgan Rogers in there as well. Brentford away. The Villa boys will be an outside captaincy pick, but I don't think I'll stray too far from Salah or Palmer going into this game week. Josh, what's the thoughts on the midfield and the captaincy conundrum?
Yeah, I think it's a solid midfield, just some tough fixtures, especially for the Liverpool boys. That Newcastle game's going to be a real interesting watch, just like the City Tottenham one as well, from a tactical point of view. Both those games are going to be really cool to watch. If I was captaining your midfield at the minute, I probably would go Salah, just because Cole Palmer, when he plays the 10, as we mentioned, is just lacks the goal threat. So even if he is going to get a return, it's more likely to be an assist than anything. Obviously, he does have penalties though, so there could be a chance of that. Salah just inevitable. I knew he would score even in that 94th minute when he did go through and score, because it's just what he does. So yeah, and obviously we saw him at St James's Park last season. He came away with a big haul, so it's not out of the realms of possibility that happens again. Rogers as well, like we mentioned, really nice pick, and hopefully Villa can sort of get those attacking cogs flowing when they go to Brentford this weekend.
Okay, and moving on to the strike force, we have tripled up on Chelsea going into game week 2. We got João Pedro up top, expecting 70 to 75 minutes again from him this game week. Don't anticipate him losing that starting spot as it stands for Chelsea, alongside Ollie Watkins as well, who, again, I think could be a really good option this game week for the fixture. And let's see if we can breed a little bit of form there for Aston Villa, because the fixtures long term are really good for the Villa boys. So I'm hoping that they can sort of start getting some goals in them. That rounds off the team. Of course, on the bench, Dubravka, Richards, as we mentioned. Van der Ven is not likely to be playing in this game week because, of course, there's no real sort of DEFCON potential as it stands with Van der Ven, and Mark Gui as well. Let's see if he gets a few more minutes this game week. So, Josh, that's the overall team. What's the overall thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's really solid. I think João Pedro is a good pick still. I would not be selling him if I owned him with the fixtures they've got coming up with West Ham and Brentford in the next three. Really good fixtures. And obviously, as a non-owner of any Chelsea attacking assets, that is a big worry for me going into this week. So, really nice team overall. And I think you do really well. Okay, then, so that wraps up our Game Week 2 team reveals. Super excited that the Premier League's back. It's a shame there's an international break after Game Week 3. Could definitely have done with a few more weeks of action. But if you did enjoy it, let us know what your team is looking like in the comments.
Yeah, absolutely. And as always, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. I've been Ben.
I've been Josh.
We'll see you guys
next time. Have a good game week, everyone.
So you